Hi, I'm Joshua from Paragon Autism Services, and thank you so much to the ARC of Greater Prince William for doing the Circle of Support Conference and hosting this. Today, I'll just be talking about some innovations in applied behavior analysis that have really started moving through the field, making waves in the field in the last like 5 to 10 years. All right, it won't be any kind of training involved in this. It's not like a workshop where you'll be able to go out and practice these things. These are, techniques you would want to get follow-up training on, but it's more just to whet your appetite and let you know what's out there. And if maybe you haven't heard about too much in applied behavior analysis recently, it might be a good refresher just to, be aware again of what's out there. All right, so first of all, we'll just do a little bit of an overview of what ABA is, in case you're maybe not that familiar with it, in case maybe you haven't heard of it too much, or maybe you just haven't had anybody really ever go over it in detail. I have been a BCBA since 2014. I've worked in the field of applied behavior analysis since 2009. What I like to tell people, ABA is a systematic and individualized teaching and behavior change methodology. It's something we can use to teach children that are having developmental delays, developmentally appropriate skills, and reduce behaviors. There's a lot of different ways to do that. And there's maybe right and wrong ways to do that. There's outdated ways to do that, and there's different levels of effectiveness the whole way, So today we'll be talking about, again, some of the newer ways, and they're still very effective, but also very safe and very ethical. And that's what I'm probably most excited to share with you guys today. If you look at this graphic over on the right, you can see the importance of smaller steps, right? ABA is really about handcrafting almost those individual steps if necessary, to the degree necessary for the child or individual to succeed, to make progress, to actually make documented progress based on data. Okay, so anytime a new skill has been learned or taught, we could describe that using the terminology of ABA, and then vice versa. If we want to teach a new skill, we can break it down using ABA and teach the skill. It's amazing. This field emerged from B.F. Skinner's work in the 1960s. It started evolving as a treatment for intellectual disability, developmental delays, and autism since the 80s, and then it's just continued to evolving since, in many ways for the better. It's now, by many insurance plans, considered medically necessary for the treatment of symptoms of autism, along with other vital therapies like speech therapy, occupational therapy, and sometimes counseling or psychiatry, other things like that. Okay. Well, let's also just review a little bit about how learning occurs. Since who knows how long it's been since you had a biology class or anything like that. But we need to remember these are actually real. Whenever you're learning a new skill, you have new neurons and forming new connections. They might not be new neurons, but they're forming. There's neurons forming new connections. Okay, if you're practicing a skill, it's strengthening existing connections, and if you're not using those connections, they're getting weaker. Okay, so ABA, I think, really can, for each individual, define what's the best way to create these new connections, these new skills for this child. What sort of environment, what sort of motivators, how do you keep them engaged, how do you keep them happy, because that's when the most learning occurs. If you're having trauma or aversive sorts of responses from kids while you're trying to teach them, you're kind of doing 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you're having, maybe they're memorizing some responses, but they're also forming these negative memories of these situations, and it's not really a socially positive experience that they're going to want to draw from in the future, which is really what the whole treatment's about, is that they'll be able to use these skills for their own betterment and their own good in the future, and to have more enjoyable social interactions in life if that's what they desire. Okay. And the cool thing about ABA is once we figure out that teaching methodology, we can train other people to do it too. And we can help everybody be on the same page. Okay. So that's just a little bit of an overview about ABA and learning, just so we're all on the same page as we go into some of these new techniques that have been kind of emerging in the field. Okay. All right. Some of you may have heard some criticisms of the old school methods of doing ABA that emerged in the 80s and 90s, and even were continued and still are in practice today. Sometimes they can be rigid and harsh and cause trauma. If they're forcing children to do things they don't want to do every day, that can be traumatic. There's frequent power struggles. There can be use of that social emotional connection or rapport that you work so hard to get as kind of a bargaining chip. You're only giving that kind of when they're earning it, so to speak, in some circumstances. And then because of that rigidity, it was sometimes incompatible, in certain environments that made it hard to collaborate, and therefore made it inconsistently. You couldn't really apply it consistently if a school could implement the same procedure as an ABA clinic or an in-home ABA provider, et cetera. And you're never going to have 100% parity across environments, but we do have to have as much consistency as possible, to have ideal rates of learning and generalization occur. All right. Today's ABA is trauma informed. It's to be assumed that any person in the care of a behavior analyst for problem behavior has experienced multiple adverse events, with many exceeding the criteria for acknowledgement that trauma has been experienced. So by learning through listening, by enriching therapeutic context, by building and maintaining trust, by following one's lead, by relying on personalized contexts where the people we're working with are happy, relaxed, and engaged, by listening to the communication bids that they're providing, by not working people through noncompliance or emotional duress, by allowing them to walk away, by making decisions based on performance, and by teaching from joy. Today's ABA is trauma informed. Okay, and that's a quote from Greg Hanley. And Greg Hanley's been a huge force in the field in the last 5 to 10 years. His research, you'll see his name on several things we talk about today. And he's really helped move the field forward into a more trauma-informed direction, that is televisable, that is, giving the individual the utmost dignity that's in treatment. And because ABA is such a powerful tool, you're able to give all those things and still make progress, as we'll see today as we get into some of these techniques. Okay, so the new methods or kind of new technologies that we look at today are kind of coming out. They really kind of stem from this sort of mission statement for today's ABA, trauma-informed ABA. That's kind of where they flow from this mindset. Okay, so we'll look at. Here's another quote. Gone are the days of working through problem behavior and negative emotional responses. Those are indicators that the treatment process needs to be adjusted. Okay. So what is the name of the one of the biggest I guess packages if you want to call it that, for addressing severe problem behavior, and also teaching the skills you need to kind of scaffold up an individual's ability to communicate, ability to tolerate, and then learn exceedingly more complicated skills, PFA and SBT, okay, practical functional assessment and skill-based treatment. It's gaining a lot of popularity now. It's because it's very, like I talked about before, the highest amount of dignity is afforded to the individual in treatment. They are, taught very, very powerful skills early on, to be able to assert, their will and have control over their environment, and not need to engage in those behaviors that often are the result of not having that sort of ability. So we'll talk about this a little bit. PFA and SBT. Oh, there's a little typo there. It should be not PFA and PFA, but PFA and SBT. Sorry about that. Okay, so the first part of the PFA and SBT, there's something called the interview-informed synthesized contingency analysis, the ISCA. All right, and that sounds complicated, but it really, if you just read the words, it's an interview-informed thing. You're going to interview someone who really knows the individual and knows their behavior, and you're going to get, you know, a lot of great answers from that individual, because that's oftentimes a parent, a teacher, so, you know, maybe an RBT, someone that's worked with that individual very closely and really kind of knows what makes that individual tick. It's a synthesized contingency analysis. So synthesize just means combining, and contingencies, you know, contingencies are just like, you know, the three-term contingencies, you know, a stimulus that, you know, has a effect on this individual's behavior, right? Or you know, the EOs that are modifying this individual's behavior, or increasing the value of reinforcers that this individual's, you know, going to be after. You're looking. So all it means is, sorry to go off on a tangent, just combining multiple, you know, things that they might want, you know, things that they might be motivated for, synthesizing those things together. So it's not just attention that they want, it's attention and toys and food. You know, it's what sorts of things can you put together for this individual, this unique, it's going to be a lot of times a unique combination of things in that synthesized contingency to make them achieve HRE, happy, to make them happy, relaxed, and engaged. So they don't have to do, you know, any kind of problem behavior to get what they want. You know, that's the first part of the ISCA. We want to make sure we can demonstrate control of that in one condition, and then we also we want to be able to, when we remove those sorts of conditions that make the individual that have the individual be inside of their HRE zone, we remove those activities and conditions, we should see a problem behavior start to emerge. Hopefully just a precursor behavior, and we can immediately, you know, give back that HRE condition and not see it escalate. But we're really able, you know, using just these two conditions, able to turn on and off a behavior, and that's the first step of the PFA and SBT process, to be able to do that. Comparing that to, you know, what a more traditional method of figuring out, you know, what makes an individual motivated to engage in these problem behaviors, the functional analysis. And this has a lot in common with functional behavior assessments that are also run by you know, many ABA companies and schools. You know, you're looking at these conditions: the control condition, the attention condition, the alone condition, the tangible condition, the escape. You're looking, which function is it individual? You're looking at those isolated contingencies. And when you're doing that, sometimes you're missing, perhaps, you know, if there are a combination of those contingencies, a synthesized contingency really that has the most control over that behavior. You know, you're going to usually miss it with this type of analysis. It doesn't really look for that. And then you also, this takes a tremendous amount of time. Usually these functional analyses, you know, would take many hours to do. And then you also can't use these sorts of analysis with dangerous problem behavior, because you have to be able to see that. You have to be able to evoke the behavior. It wasn't just for precursors usually. Okay, so this is kind of the old school methodology, and it's still used today. It still has validity, you know. But here's some comparing the results between doing the ISCA now. You know, on the left side, you can see the ISCA is done in, you know, typically 5 or 6 sessions. You can see very clearly, you know, that you have your two conditions are very, very much separate, right? You have your all of the test and controls conditions at 0 in the ISCA. When you are providing that sort of synthesized contingency, okay, and then as soon as you remove the synthesized contingency, you saw, you know, in this first example, you saw precursor behavior tick up, you know, start to emerge. but it was immediately able to be turned off and you were able to go back to control a condition, so it's very quick, usually able to be done within 30 minutes or so. And you're able to see a clear difference between the conditions, okay? Whereas, with that, the standard FA, like we looked at from the previous page, these results are often a lot more messy, and may not really be able to give, the best, clinical it might not really be able to lead to the best conclusions clinically for that child. It's less clear. Okay. All right. Here's another bit of data suggesting that, for synthesized contingencies, the ones we talked about where you're combining multiple things that are making that individual very, where they're happy, relaxed, and engaged. You can see here, this graph is a little tough to understand, but bear with me here. So mean baseline reduction here is, if a baseline reduction is going down, if the reduction is going down, that means it's actually increasing, right? So you can see that when they were isolated, there were some individuals where even though they're giving them the isolated, they're trying to, stop the behavior and control the behavior using those isolated contingencies. They weren't able to do so for those individuals until they used synthesized contingencies. Okay. So that's an important thing too. You're, like I talked about earlier, you're just not able to capture what's really motivating the behavior using isolated contingencies in some cases. Okay. So that first thing we talked about was the ISCA. That's like the first step of the PFA and SBT process. Especially if you have severe problem behavior, you want to get that under control. Okay, and then once that's under control, you have an idea. Well, and not necessarily under control. You want to understand the behavior. You want to be able to turn it on and off, right? So you do have it under control, right? You can turn it off permanently if you keep providing HRE, that happy, relaxed, engaged environment and activities, etc., whatever makes that child, tick, so to speak. Okay. Now, after you get past the ISCA, you'll look at teaching some communication skills, teaching some toleration skills, teaching them to relinquish items, teaching them to transition. And this you can see all those are like the core or the trunk of the tree, right? Those are the things that they really need to be in place before we can get anywhere else with any kind of without forcing the issue so much that you're going to have problem behavior, at least without making it too challenging or so isolated for that individual that's not really applicable to them. An individual really needs to be able to do these things in each environment that they're in if they're going to be ready to learn. Okay, so that's kind of, skill-based treatment really starts off and has a big emphasis on these things first before we go off and teach these other skills that are again, they need to be very, they're called CABs, they're contextually appropriate behavior. So it's not just, going and running some discrete trial for math problems, it's making sure that when this individual is learning these skills for math, they're going to be able to participate in a socially meaningful way using those skills. Again, that guarantees the skills are going to be practiced and utilized, and not just sit in a book somewhere in there with their data in there. It's not really used unless someone drags that book out. So it is a shift, in thinking, but it definitely helps the individuals, a ton when they're having this kind of support from the ground up. Okay. Another thing that you can add on to skill-based treatment, that PFA and SBT thing that we just talked about. This is by not by hand. Well, Hanley was a co-author on this, but it's by Adityan Rajaraman. It's the enhanced choice model of skill-based treatment. Okay, and this is really neat. This kind of blows your mind, so you're doing that whole PFA and SBT approach that we already talked about just in the previous slides, but you're allowing these choices. This is the enhanced choice model. You're allowing these choices. You're allowing them, they can either participate in treatment involving differential reinforcement. So they're getting praise, and when they're doing cooperating, they're putting good effort forward, they're maybe having some socially appropriate responses, whatever is the goal for that individual, in that session. They can do a hangout with non-contingent access to reinforcers. Okay, those are, it's not like the works reinforcers, it's like their reinforcers. They can just go and have a hangout with it alone, or they can just leave the therapeutic space altogether. Okay, so this has been tested, this has been replicated in a few different school and clinic settings, and it's been shown to be effective. The participants spent most of their time participating in the skill-based treatment context, in that differential reinforcement context, where they're getting social reinforcement and they're reinforcing items and they're learning. And then they acquired communication skills, they acquired high levels of cooperation, previously evocative instructions that used to cause problem behavior. Okay. This initial study, so this was a quote from the initial study, but it has been replicated, demonstrated that SBT can be applied safely and successfully without physical guidance. So without restraint, without even, I guess, I'm sure there's maybe some light prompting, like if you needed to, show someone an answer, like in a teaching scenario, but not any kind of physical guidance to kind of coerce or move an individual around. To kind of force them to learn. So here is some of that data from the enhanced choice model, and you can see the gray, these bars are in practice. Okay, so you can see when they're 100%, that means they spent the entire time in practice. You can see this individual did test out that termination a little bit. Who knows, maybe things got a little too challenging and I had to back off on some things and add in some more prompting or something. I'm not sure, but you can see overwhelmingly that individual chose to participate in that treatment, in that practice session. And then the same thing here. This one spent a little bit of time in the hangout, but by and large, when they were given the choice of, do you want frequent access to the reinforcer with me, and I can, be teaching you at the same time and we can be having fun together, or do you just want to go off on your own in your hangout room and do it? That's pretty neat. Pretty neat stuff. I think a testament to the procedure that the individual would choose that it must be gentle and fun, if a kid is choosing that, or if multiple kids in the studies are choosing. Okay. We also have today to talk about the Parent Balance Program, which is it's a home-based parent-implemented protocol geared towards the prevention of severe problem behavior. So it's not for kids that are already having a lot of issues. It's not like trying to, have parents deal with really difficult behavior, that's requires additional help. I mean, there's definitely a lot of that. But this is for parents that, maybe there's some delay in communication, maybe there's some, mild problem behavior cropping up, and it's due to the frustration, that could be prevented by teaching those skills that we talked about from skill-based treatment, the things like functional communication response, being able to tolerate, being able to relinquish items, stuff like that. So it goes through those sorts of protocols. The parent serves as a primary implementer and is a skill build. They just go through different skills every week. They use the BCBA or behavior analyst support for about 2 hours a week, but the rest of the work is done from the parents, a little bit every day or so. All right, you can see some data from this as well, just showing, that this emerging problem behavior at baseline, was happening 1 to 3 times per minute, it looks like, on average for each of these individuals. And once you teach that functional communication response and get down there and start playing with your child, and it goes through all that, then you see that behavior go down to near 0 levels very, very quickly, for almost all the individuals, or for all the individuals. For this is also very, very similar to how the PFA and SBT data look when you have a BCBA or an RBT with the BCBA doing that that PFA and SBT and, after the ISCA is done, and this is also this sort of data is also in those it can be expected in those treatments. So. Okay, and then last but not least, we have this behavioral skills training. This one has been really widely adapted recently, within the last 10 years or so. Just from a search in the last 10 years, we had this and probably about 20 other ones. So we'll talk about that. But BST, or behavioral skills training, if you haven't heard of that, it's basically providing the instructions, usually a variety of formats. Hopefully usually multiple formats, whether it's, written, along with a video model, modeling's next. And then you do a rehearsal, that the individual that learns will actually practice with the instructor, do a rehearsal, and then they'll get feedback on the skill until criterion is met usually. Okay, so it sounds very straightforward, but it's a systematic process. It requires you do these steps in this order, and if that individual doesn't meet the criterion, you're going to keep going through those steps basically until they get it. So you really can't fail, hopefully, doing it this way, when you're trying to teach people new skills. Okay, and it might take some time, but they learn the skill that way. And this is really, honestly, this is how a lot of ABA works. If you look at what we're doing with the kids when we're teaching them skills, a lot of times that's basically what this is. So that's why it works in behavioral skills training too, right? It's nothing new. But anyway, it's been taught for fire safety and lockdown procedures for children in schools and staff, parent taught social skills, getting parents more equipped to teach those. Excuse me. Hands-only CPR. All right. It's also been used to teach, prevent gunplay in children. Excuse me. It's been used to teach community safety skills to youth, teaching safe football tackling skills, improving college interview skills, and for parent treatment of child food selectivity. Okay, and that was just there's on all these slides that I'm going over. There's usually a link on the bottom to where you can find out more. I also have a resource page at the end where you'll also have a lot of links to be able to find out more about this stuff. But BST has been it's been really encouraging to see that the use of that technique across such a wide area of disciplines. And we use it inside our own company as well at Paragon. We also use a PFA and SBT model that we talked about. We trained all our staff about that earlier this year, and it's been fantastic. Just for our clients' benefit, but also just seeing the staff grow and learn to think about ABA a little differently. So here's some of those learning resources I talked about. We have Dr. Hanley's PFA. This is Dr. Greg Hanley, the guy we talked about at the beginning, who came up with PFA and SBT with a lot of other researchers, obviously, in their help, but he's one of the main proponents for it. He has a lot of free resources, and he has an open-ended interview on his website, on this website here, practicalfunctionalassessment.com. Dr. Hanley and his organization, they also have FTFBC, which provides individual and organizational level training for how to do PFA and SBT. Whether you're a school or whether you're an ABA agency or an individual, they have different courses that you can take or look into having your staff, take. This is paid, obviously, for that one, for the FTFBC. We have the ABA therapy fact sheet from the BACB, from the Board Analyst Certification Board, who manages all the behavior analyst certifications. I have my renewal coming up next year, actually, but this goes over the behavioral treatment of autism and other developmental disabilities, just so you can get, if you wanted to see any information about the numbers of that, the numbers on that, or when it's recommended, et cetera. We have an ISCA demonstration video, which shows a staff member performing ISCA with a child, real demo. it is really neat to be able to see just, again, how gentle and how empowering it is with a child, the learning that their words and their behaviors have that power, and they learn it so quickly when you do when you perform the ISCA, and then when you're starting off PFA and SBT as well. There's some PFA and SBT ABA software. It also has the Parent Balance program in as well, like an option to use that as well at Hierasmus.com. That is Dr. Ruppel and Dr. Hanley. I believe Dr. Hanley also works on that. But Dr. Ruppel, who came up with the Parent Balance program, I've seen her stuff on here, and that would be a way to access that. And then if you just want more information about ABA, if you're interested in learning how to become a BCBA or a BCABA or whatever, an RBT, the BACB website has a ton of great information about that. Okay. Once again, I'm Joshua Farrow. I'm from Paragon Autism Services. My number's down here. If you ever have any questions, you can also reach me via email. And again, I hope this has been informative. Thanks again for the ARC of Greater Prince William for hosting the Circle of Support conference. And you guys have a good one. Thank you.